So Sam Harris has been putting out more content recently. He's also abandoned his free model. You know, the thing that he talked to us about where he gives the content away for free to anybody who asks for it. That's been abandoned, whatever. But he releases some content where he is engaged with like discussion with his business manager. And his business manager is actually, what would be the comparison that I could give you? He's like an enlightened centrist. Like, it kind of sounds like Konstantin Kisin, to be honest. So in this case, he was peppering Sam with like his questions about, you know, the Biden mental health cover-up, alleged cover-up from like the Jake Tapper book. And then, you know, Sam was saying, oh yes, it's bad. But, you know, in comparison to all the shit that Trump does, it's really not a big deal at all.
It's quite possible that he was just checked out to a degree that I did not suspect at the time. But to close the loop on this whole scandal, even that is preferable to me and to, I think, many Democrats than having someone who we consider to be genuinely evil, genuinely 100% purposed to serving himself in the office of the presidency. I would rather have a president in a coma where the duties of the presidency are executed by a committee of just normal people, right? So that's the choice that many of us believe was before us, and so therefore, not much materially changes once you reveal just how insane and despicable this cover-up of Biden's infirmities actually
but Sam,
was.
But how you get there matters. And it would be one thing if those people told the American people, hey, he's not compos mentis. We're going to take it from here. Yeah. We know what we're doing. We're fine. But that didn't happen. And I mean, just the scale of things, Trump's out there making hotel deals. And I know that's embarrassing. And this is a bit of a Sophie's choice, but you really would rather not have been betrayed by your own president than have somebody out in the open, just, you know, with his kleptocracy, getting he and his friends rich?
No, but I mean, the problem with Trump runs much deeper than that. I mean, that is totally disqualifying in a president. It's illegal. I mean, I think it is the very definition of unconstitutional.
But his manager was like, no, but come on.
I said this last time, there's something more off-putting and gross to me about lying and in secrecy than there is out in the open. And I know that's probably more of an irrational,
but it's not all out in the open. There's a lot out in the open, and you have to imagine that that's the tip of the iceberg of corruption, right? I mean, that's to grade Trump on a curve so fully that the visibility of his sins are exculpatory, right, is just pure delusion, right? You have no idea what you don't know about what he's into, right? In the same way, and we already know he lies more than any other person that can be named, right, anywhere in public life. So it's the idea that he's not covering anything up is it just doesn't fly.
Again, I mean, the Trump lies to me. I don't know why, and we'll have to understand this or get some psychologist or sociologist or someone to explain this. But it just feels like when it says he's got a building that's 20 stories tall and it's only 10. I just don't really care. Or some of the other lies, they just feel. Of course, it's corrupt to be both the policymaker and the deal maker.
He deports someone to a torture room in El Salvador, and then laughs about it at the Oval Office and says he can't get him back. Right?
Yeah, I'm not defending that.
That's a lie.
This was, his manager seemed convinced that, and even while Sam was saying, well, look at all these examples where Trump has done, much stronger lies, the big lie, all this kind of thing. But his manager was just like, but I kind of feel they're the same. Like the Democrats are just as bad, right? Like this reveals they're just as bad. So
the damage done to our society, to our system, the way we've edged toward fascism just by throwing due process out the window, all of that's an unacknowledged harm.
Yeah, okay, but the damage to our system, you're right. The big lie was terrible. The big lie was about one president lying about, one person lying about becoming president versus the Biden lie, which is a person lying about being president.
Well, no, but the thing is, all right, but again, you have to you have to acknowledge the obvious malice of the first lie and the ambiguity and the slow rolling nature of the other lie. I mean, we know that there are Republicans who are in fear for their lives to speak honestly in public about Donald Trump, right? There's nothing like that going on in the Biden universe, as corrupted and self-serving as it is. There's no comparison between the two. There still isn't.
But we still don't know the depths of the lies. I mean, I understand. I mean, you can call it 1,000-fold or whatever it is. A lie is a lie. And it does feel to me, maybe I'm handicapping my expectations here for ethics, but I feel really betrayed. I really feel betrayed by what just occurred.
Sounds manager's kind of shit is the takeaway I would make from that. But the point I want to mention was, so Sam justified like his position on Israel, right? Because he's been accused of being very one-sided and not very reasonable in his presentation of that conflict, right? Like a little bit of a cartoonish presentation of the Palestinian side, right? Now, we are people that raised that point with Sam directly, for example, previously, but many others have as well. And Sam wrote a Substack called Whataboutery, right? He's talking in response to people raising this point that like whenever he's asked about Israel and what's going on in Gaza, that he raises like other countries and conflicts, right? Very quickly. And he wanted to argue it's not whataboutery, but the bit that got me, Matt, and I don't need to go into the argument, but there's just a very strong sense in that blog post, as there have been in many other blogs that Sam has released, that people are misunderstanding him and therefore they think he's wrong. If they properly understood his argument, they couldn't think that he's wrong because he's right. Right. It's like an interesting thing because I'm perfectly aware, you're perfectly aware that there are people who could disagree with us on points and they understand our argument, right? And they have just different conclusions. They think like, no, that doesn't convince me. I read this more or whatever, but they've understood our argument. They just don't agree. But I feel like in Sam's Bertels views, it often is like, if you really did properly understand what he knows about determinism, about morality, about self and identity, you can't really properly have understood and reached different conclusions.
Yeah, no, I think that does go to Sam's character a little bit. Like if you did practice, Buddhist practice, mindfulness practice like he did, then you would understand that he is right. So I feel like it's conforming with what you're
It
noticing
is, yeah. He did raise that point with us, right? Like where we discussed this, and when we tried to suggest that there are people that have done practices and reached different conclusions, he did, in principle, acknowledge that that's possible. But I'm not so sure he always lives by that, acknowledgement. But anyway, in any case, Matt, I encourage people to read it and see if they think I'm misrepresenting it or whatever the case might be. It's a short little response, but I find it interesting because it's a kind of thing where like I can imagine the impetus to like write to correct people's erroneous views about like what they have interpreted your position to be. But I don't kind of anticipate the added step, which is like, once you understand my position, you will recognize that it is obviously correct. Because like, people have a lot of different beliefs and views and yeah.
That's how normal people would think about things. Like we understand that sometimes people don't agree and they have access to the same information. They've understood what it is that you're putting forward, but they are operating from different assumptions, or weighting.
Or different values.
Different values, that's right. Or weighting different sources of evidence differently from yourself. And they may be correct or incorrect in those prior things that they're bringing into it, just like we all bring stuff into it. But there are legitimate ways in which people can disagree. I mean, even in a really simplistic way, like an anti-vaxxer or a UFO enthusiast could, I think, understand the arguments that I might make against them perfectly. But they believe a bunch of other different things from me, which cause them to reject them. They may well be wrong to believe those other things, but they haven't misunderstood me.
Yes, yeah. That's the sense I get. And I know I'm picking on Sam Harris here a little bit, right? But this is a kind of behavior that I've seen across a whole range of different, people and groups and whatnot that include people with absolutely the opposite kind of positions than Sam on a whole range of issues. And it's kind of like this intolerance for diversity in a way, like diversity of opinion or acknowledgement that differing conclusions are possible. It's like, to a degree, it's a little bit of a fundamentalist mindset, right? That there is a single truth. If you have these facts, then you will reach this conclusion. And obviously, there are cases, right? To make it more closer to home for me, I think that the scientific evidence very obviously proves, without any alternative valid interpretation, that vaccines are beneficial to people's health, right? And any proper analysis of the evidence will reveal that. But I also understand that there are people who are aware of that evidence and reject it or weight other evidence like differently. And so they reach different conclusions. It doesn't have to be that they don't know that the evidence exists that I'm aware of, right? They just reach different conclusions. And so you can still think that like not all position, I'm not arguing for like a relativist position where like everybody is equally valid in every conclusion they draw. No. But it's just kind of like recognizing that people will arrive at different things and still understand.
I think there's a continuum of being like so tolerant and so open to everyone can believe anything you want. Everyone's got their own truth.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not what I believe.
No, I know it's not. I know it's not. That's one end of the spectrum, right? And then there's another edge of the spectrum, which is incredibly intolerant of people that don't agree with you 100%. Right, like Nassim Taleb is like that. Arguably, some segments of the political spectrum feel this way about stuff where unless you are on board 100% with the thing, then you're an idiot or you're bad in some way. You're beyond the pale. For me, not surprisingly, I'm somewhere in between. Like for me personally, this is just nothing but a heuristic. This is just my personal feeling. Just that there are some issues for me that I feel like if you believe this, like we're being currently visited by UFOs and the US government has got them, for instance, right? Or you're an anti-vaxxer or whatever. Like I can understand the reasons why you believe those things. But for me, it's a bit of a deal breaker in that I'm sorry, I can't really respect your opinion and not think badly of you, right? On the other hand, like there are issues like, I don't know, whether or not the West should be intervening and supporting Ukraine, right? About which I feel strongly about, but about which I understand that reasonable people can disagree, right? They may feel like the risk of nuclear war or something, right, is too great to be risked or whatever the case may be. It doesn't make me sympathetic to their point of view more, but I don't see disagreeing about many things as to be disqualifying. So I think I think people err on both sides of those things. Like Sam Harris is kind of, he's a bit bespoke, but he's kind of at one end of that spectrum where unless you have like are completely in accordance with how he looks at something, then it really demonstrates to him that you haven't understood the situation well enough.
This is why, as you pointed out there, Matt, like people could end up with like different values and different red lines where they think this is disqualifying for interacting with people. This makes people immoral, right? And it all depends on like way people weight things and different values and whatnot, right? And to some extent, those you can't make universal rules that will apply because it will all be specific to people's contexts and situations. But there's also this aspect, and it's often commented on, that like hardcore atheist type, right? Which you and I would be counted in the category of atheists, but like some atheists, especially ones that were strongly anti-theist, they actually preferred the kind of fundamentalist approach to religion because the fundamentalists, they viewed as like taking things seriously, trying to like grapple with the text says this, so that is what it means, right? Like there is a interpretation, and these kind of like more fluffy or potentially contradictory, the kind of like liberal approaches to religion, they're not really doing what the texts set out, right? Whereas fundamentalists, at least, they can agree on here's things in the original canon or whatever that we need to grapple with. So in that sense, there is like a noted kinship between like that A interpretation and one which is very reductive is the only way that you can approach it. And everything else is like kind of misrepresenting or, you know, like in an invalid way. So
it feels like a Redditor's approach to things.
yeah.
And to be absolutely clear, for me, like religious belief, it does not fall into the category of something for me that invalidates them as someone who is rational and, you know, is worth talking to and has good opinions about things. Like I know people who are religious, usually not fundamentalists, they're just, you know, normally kind of religious or whatever. And, you know, they're perfectly well-informed, interesting, good people to talk to with views I can respect. It doesn't make me want to agree with them on that particular point. But yeah, I don't particularly like that kind of like fundamentalist kind of way of approaching right and wrong, where you draw a reasonably narrow, hard, bright line between right-thinking people like you and those people on the outer. Like that is that kind of cultish behavior that you see in the extremist religious groups. And you get those in group, out group things and all those other toxic social dynamics.
Yeah.
I will hand it to Sam though. I think like he's bespoke, but I don't think he's this. He's not very much the same as many of the other gurus that we look at. Like someone like an Eric Weinstein. I was just thinking about him because, you know, in the time since his debate with Sean Carroll, during which he accused Sean Carroll ridiculously of being too online, spending too much time doing on YouTube and stuff like that. Whereas, my God, pot calling the kettle black. Eric's been on like two other YouTube appearances. Like that's literally his job, doing YouTube things. He does nothing else as far as anyone can tell. I mean, people like Eric and most of the gurus we cover, they, including Jordan before, right, with this wordplay and definition play and semantic fluffiness. I'm not sure if Nietzsche really said this or not, but there's this quote which is that they muddy the water to make it seem deep, right? And that's what most of them do. And I don't think that's true of Sam Harris. I think he's very bespoke. He's like he's an intellectual bulldozer. You know, it's his way or the highway sort of thing. But he doesn't muddy the water to pretend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do agree. That is a difference that like he tries to make his position clear and like for better or worse, that is his position. Now, like the degree to which he tolerates any other position might be the issue that I would take there. But in terms of clarity and trying to clarify what he actually is saying, I often don't feel confused. But that is often why when Sam is like, you know, one of his responses, like this person doesn't understand what I'm saying, right? Like, because they're criticizing me and that means obviously they don't understand me properly. And then he'll go to steps, you know, to try and outline how they must be misinterpreting him. But so it's that thing where like,
I think he's genuinely trying to, you know, engage and communicate and all of that stuff as best as he knows how.
Yeah.
And depending on the topic, you get the varying degrees of success. But I don't see many of our other actors operating like that. Like someone like Jordan Peterson, like we heard before, is papering over constantly the inconsistencies and the fuzziness in his worldview.
Well, because like with Sam, there's one last example I can think of that will illustrate it. Like he's still very, very upset with Ezra Klein, right? Because Ezra Klein criticized him for promoting Charles Murray. And he views that Ezra Klein was malicious in misrepresenting because he was trying to imply that he was a racist, right? But like if you listen to his debate with Ezra, or you read the things that Ezra said, he didn't say that. He basically said that like Sam was rather credulous towards Murray and was promoting his discredited views about race and IQ as a form of forbidden knowledge. And he was doing this based on very limited research, right? Just simply having read the bell curve and pointing out that like mainstream psychologists, I agree about like a differential gap between ethnic groups in the US or whatever the case might be, right? Ezra Klein knew all of that. He did know all of that. And he was criticizing Sam about like a specific thing, right? He was basically criticizing for being too credulous and not paying attention to the broader context and like what Charles Murray was saying is in fact controversial in various ways. But Sam's reading of that still is that was, you know, a malicious misrepresentation, or Ezra simply didn't understand. Otherwise, he could never have said the things that he did in good faith.
There's still harm done. There's still many, many people out there who think, okay, well, where there's smoke, there's got to be fire. And, they hear something about what I'm up to. They see a clip online. They like what I've said. They're seeing me for the first time. They check me out. They don't have to dig very deep to see that, okay, this guy's been called a racist and a pseudoscientist and in pretty high places. And the articles are still there in Vox to read, right? They don't know that many, academics came to my defense, and, one of the most prominent researchers on, that whole issue of IQ came to my defense, and, Vox under Ezra's stewardship wouldn't print his rebuttal as though they had run out of pixels on the website. And so all that harm, all that damage is still being done, right? And it just doesn't matter to me because I'm impervious to it. But it just as a matter of my career, right? Just like it never shows up. But I just know that there are people who suspect I'm racist even now, and it's because of what Ezra did at that point. The amount of slime he threw in my direction, and he's never recognized that one how just dishonest it was, because he knows I'm not a racist, right? I'll give him at least that much credit. He's not that confused. So he attempted a kind of reputational murder. That attempt is ongoing because the material is still out there. People are discovering it even now for the first time. And so, this is part of this is indelible. I mean, if, however many years from now, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now, I have an obituary and my daughters have to read that their father was, in certain circles suspected of being a racist jerk. That's going to be because of what Ezra successfully did back in whenever that was, 2017. That's a cost, right? And it's an unfair cost because I actually, he and I both know that that I find racism as appalling as he does, right? And yet he worked very hard to produce that outcome. That's just not ethical. It's not journalism. It's part of what this environment of casual defenestration of good people that produced this monstrosity on the right so successfully, which is Trumpism. He has to own a significant piece of that. And there's a short list of people who I would put in his class of having done that much harm to our political discourse.
And I don't read it like that. I read Ezra understood Sam's position, thought it was worthy of criticism. And you could argue that his critique was unfair or whatever, Sam, but that Sam takes the position, that he couldn't have done that in good faith. And I don't see anything in what Ezra said that suggests he doesn't understand Sam's position and that his criticism isn't based on that.
Yeah, I think there's something about those accusations or implications, as it's read, of racism that are particularly triggering. I mean, you heard it with Joe Rogan and
Flint Dibble,
right?
Yeah.
He implied something similar, and he was correct in point, in fact, about the, Atlantis stuff and, Nazis and
people
so on.
that are fond of Graham Hancock's thesis. Yes, he was correct.
He was correct. But so it's incredibly triggering because it's taken as the implication. So I don't know. On one hand, there was a thing, but it's probably still going, but it became almost a joke of calling everything racist and, so I can understand the reactivity to some degree, but I take your point, right? That Sam doesn't revisit things. I don't think he went back and listened to it or thought about it.
Oh, he's thought about it.
Oh, he's thought about it. Well, he's ruminated on the conclusions he's already drawn. But that's Sam's style, right?
Yeah, of course. He hasn't went back and done what Ezra said, which was look at Charles Murray's output, read his other books, look at, in-depth critiques of him. He hasn't done that, but what he has done is remained very annoyed by this event from many years ago, which Ezra Klein never mentioned.
No, I think he's forgotten about it completely. Yeah, it's funny. It's a funny old fish.
Yeah, that's it. So, grievance mongering, Matt. Just saying it's on the barometer for a reason.
It's on the barometer for a reason. We're not just making this stuff up.
And the race IQ field as well. If you want to talk about that you should do investigations.
Yeah.
And you should just spend some time looking into Charles Murray, that whole side of the
I know.
realist diversity.
There's
so much there.
I've looked into it. There is a lot there. There is a lot of disturbing connections.
There's a lot of fire and a lot of smoke, and the two things are going together for a reason. So
that's the thing. But I know what's happened with Sam, right? Which is that I'm not giving him a break for this, but I can empathize to some degree because I myself, when I first became aware of that issue, my very first initial response was, they seem to be, everyone's jumping up and down. And
they're overreacting.
And so on. And it did seem like that kind of case. But then I looked into it and I changed my mind, right? Now, I think I know where Sam has gone wrong because he never got...
that might be missing. And you could say this is testing dispersions, but like in all the content of Sam's that I've seen, I've never seen any evidence that he's properly looked into, that whole area, the human biodiversity movement and the various associations there. He just views it as a smear. So whatever. That's strong opinions, low levels of research. It's a common affliction.
Yeah. Common affliction with our gurus. Very confident, very strong. They develop their views quickly, and
they don't change. They
never look back.
Yeah, that's it. In the last supplementary material, you might remember me having a little bit of a go at Sam's manager, Sam Harris's manager, right? You remember he was kind of both sidesing the stuff around the Biden cover-up, right? His health and maybe Trump's lies are more out in the open, that this is better, right? And I think I titled the segment something like Sam Harris's manager sucks. So something like that. So there's been another AMA with Sam, and it speaks to some of the themes we talk about. But the first thing is his manager wants to clear up for people like me who might have got the wrong end of the stick. So listen to this.
Well, just a quick housekeeping before we do. I need to clarify some things. Many, this isn't for you, this is for the audience. Many in the audience have already picked up on this, but again, just to clarify, the goal of this series is more from Sam on current events more often. My job here is to draw more energy out of Sam to surface his ideas in a format that's a little looser than the podcast. So the tone will be more casual. If the pacing is faster, that's all intentional. I'll sometimes play devil's advocate and even exaggerate positions, whatever it takes to keep things moving. None of this is about me, so don't get caught up on what you think my positions actually are.
This is your response to some hate mail?
Oh, well, this is just to clarify. I think a lot of people, most people got it, but some people were confused. And, and one of the reasons why we didn't bring on another academic or intellectual is that they would show up with their own agenda. And that's not what we wanted here. We wanted to really push you around. And so this will feel different from the polished conversations and essays that the audience is used to. Again, that's intentional. And this series is not meant to be a replacement for anything.
Okay. So, we just got it wrong, Matt. Or at least I just got it wrong. It's, he's just asking questions. He's not actually presenting his opinions, right? He's only kind of playing devil's advocate as a stand-in to get Sam to flesh out his ideas more. So it might have sounded like he was very strongly emotionally reacting to the Biden revelations, right? And downplaying the lies of the Trump administration. But that was all to draw out more of Sam's opinion. He has no agenda. He has no positions. He's just there as a facilitator. Got that?
Yep. Got
okay.
It.
That will help frame, what's going on in some of these other clips. So this is a little bit about, talking about Doge and the impact that it had.
And how we get to the point where we all just vomit in unison, I don't know. But I mean, we have to get there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it possible that we needed a Trump or a Musk type or both of them in Doge to begin to
realize how bad Trump and Musk and Doge are?
No. Realize, to start taking the debt seriously. I mean, do you really think if Kamala Harris was elected, we'd be doing that? Do you think there'd be an abundance movement without Trump?
Well, I mean,
is there some credit that goes there?
It's a interesting question, but I mean, you're saying that any kind of pendulum swing back to sanity it can be credited to just how bad things have gotten.
Well, there you go, Matt. That's an example, right, of just posing the kind of hypothetical to get Sam set off. So he suggested there, would there be even talk about reducing the deficit without, if it had been Kamala Harris. Come on.
Right. But of course, Trump is increasing the deficit.
Well, yeah. But, Matt, the fact that we're even talking.
We're talking about it more. Okay, that would never have happened before. Okay. And the abundance thing, that's Ezra Klein, right? He coined that with his book. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's Ezra Klein. But he's responding, Matt, to the fact that the Democrats, they're too obsessed with regulation, environmental protection stuff and all this kind of stuff. So that's happening.
So Ezra Klein was emboldened by the Trump presidency to push this. Okay, right.
The argument is like he's trying to present an alternative path, right? Whereas if Kamala Harris had won, the Democrats might not have needed an alternative path forward.
Devil's advocate. Yep, I got it.
Yeah, it's not like that's his position, right? That's not his position. Now, Sam is going to have another conversation with Jordan Peterson, and they're talking about, how do you approach that or this kind of thing. So this is his manager talking about Jordan Peterson.
I know you're going on Jordan Peterson's podcast soon, and so I want to talk about him for a moment. He's been credited for bringing so many people back to Christianity 2.0, more of the, I guess, live and let live Christians versus the 1980s, or I guess the 1480s for that matter. I think there are a number of reasons why Jordan has been so effective here, and I want to come back to him in a moment, but coinciding with his efforts is a massive loneliness epidemic, and it's very real. Given your concerns with religion and the current inability for any other organizations to recapitulate a communal experience in quite the same way religion has been able to, do you feel differently now about people finding their way back to faith?
There, Matt, like Jordan Peterson, undeniably effective. We'll come back to that. But again, I'm probably misunderstanding here, but the impression I'm getting is like his manager largely agrees with, the kind of Vervaeke, the meaning crisis, the loneliness epidemic, that there's a lot to be said for what Jordan has delivered to people. But, there's issues, but
yeah, he can see the benefit of Jordan Peterson steering back people towards faith and everything. So his role here as a foil, as a contrarian voice, someone for Sam to riff off, that's one way to put it. I mean, the other way to put it is that he's trying to steer Sam or get Sam to, maybe reluctantly have to agree with taking a more conservative stance on a lot of these issues.
I'll go for a couple more clips where there is like a little bit of complexity, but this claim that, it's not going to be about his manager's point of view or opinions at all. That's not what it's about, Matt. It's about, just throwing things out there that might not even be his opinion to get Sam to respond. So
just asking questions, Chris. Just
asking questions. So let's listen to a little bit more of the questions.
If we could edit the homophobia out of Christianity.
But they have. I mean, a lot of new, that's what I'm saying.
No, but like really edit it so that it made absolutely no sense to be homophobic. Like there's no recourse to the teachings that could get you homophobia.
Okay, but there are a lot of people that are looking away these days and just don't pay attention to that. They're
true.
ignoring that. So I think there is a new version of it, and people who are looking for purpose and community, after what so many people have seen social media do, it's just ripped society apart, and it's also just made people feel so alone, or it's at least contributed, I believe, in a big way. Why not? Why not encourage people, as Jordan has, to find faith? And I'm sure there's other reasons there as well, but for purpose and community. I mean, I don't necessarily understand the Catholicism part. It feels very ritualistic. I would imagine people would look for something a little bit more lightweight for their connectivity, but I kind of get why people are doing it. As somebody who was a former practicing Jew, as I've said this before, I really miss community, and there's just nothing that's replaced that for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think that's a void, and we need to fill it. But the question is, can we fill it with something better and more reasonable and not intrinsically divisive?
Well, Chris, I'm going to jump in ahead of you because I'm going to be your foil. I'm going to be your contrarian.
Go.
Because I don't know. I mean, it's okay. He's voicing a legitimate point of view there, which it's not tendentious to say that social media is not a force that sort of brings people together and gives a sense of community, except for the DTG Patreon. All the rest of it is shit, though. And this is a thing that you and I know, that, religious institutions do provide social functions that are, important. So what's wrong with him proposing this, pushback to Sam's anti-religionism?
I don't care about somebody presenting a social functional view of religion and that. But I think you should be honest about what is and is not your opinion. It's very clear to me that that is Sam's manager's opinion, right? He's making reference to his experience. He doesn't really get the Catholicism stuff, right? But he likes the community aspects and stuff. But like, that's his position, right? That's the bit that he was saying, Jordan Peterson is effective, and I think these kind of things need to be acknowledged. But so that claim at the start about, look, I'm going to take positions that they're not really about what I think about the topic, and it's just to play devil's advocate. That is not the case. That's the same reason that like he was arguing about the Trump thing. He was saying, I think that when Trump lies, it's just not as bad to me personally. So you can't do that, do the claim of, well, it's not about me. It's not about like, so I think his manager wants to have, understandably, a conversation with Sam where he presents his opinions as well and gets Sam to respond to them. But he doesn't want to own that is his opinion. So that's my issue. And the one other caveat that I'll add, Matt, is I don't add me in your anti-social media crusade. You and Jonathan Haidt, I think the evidence about the effects of social media is much more mixed. I'm not on a Sam Harris anti-social media destroys society crusade. I don't agree with that take. So yeah, don't invoke the Royal Podcast me on my behalf.
I know, but I think what they're speaking to is not that, I don't know, if you use TikTok or something, it's going to break your brain, but rather the modern secular zeitgeist is one which continues the modernity, which is a sense of individualism and self-reliance, right? Economically self-reliant and to a large degree socially self-reliant, right? It started with the nuclear family and then it's kind of gotten smaller from there, right? That's kind of different from more traditional communities where people were more interrelated and relied on each other a lot more. Now, you don't want to romanticize that kind of setup because there's a lot of awful things about living in a tiny little village where everyone knows your business and stuff. There's a reason why we don't want to be hanging out with our next door neighbors every single day. But, I was just making the soft point that it's okay to talk about these things.
It's fine to talk about it. I just don't like people presenting themselves as not doing something and then doing it, right? The kind of strategic disclaimer approach. Yeah. And I will also say that in response to your, just asking questions, stimulus, Matt, that it is also the case, however, that while you're right about, the fraying of extended family networks and kinship communities and whatnot, we've also seen the flourishing of various digital communities and people building communities around like shared interests in sports or these kind of things. And I think you have to deal with all of it. And there's a lot of cherry picking that goes on when people want to make like a polemical case around this. But it certainly is the case with modernity overall, that there has been a contraction of like in-person physical networks. But the internet in so many ways opened, like the reason it's called social media, social networks and stuff, is because that's what people are mostly spending their time doing. Social interactions online. Yeah. And that is social interactions, whether or not you like it.
Look, I'm on board. I was just asking questions, Chris. I was just standing in for a point of view.
I'm speaking to whoever happens to be,
If you voice a contrarian opinion to Chris, he will not let you take that point of view.
Am I not like? Look, hold on.
But I agree with you.
No, I got to respond here because there's this tactic, but I'm not saying you do it, okay? I'm just talking about a general person.
General people, okay.
Yes, there's a general person where they do this thing where they say, okay, I'm going to make a counterpoint, right? And they raise a counterpoint. And then you say, well, but no, I see that counterpoint, but here's the point. And then they say, oh, well, nobody can disagree with you. But by raising the counterpoint, you are making, oh, not you, sorry. The person is raising a particular argument. So you can't then call out when somebody says, well, but I think this, right? Like both people are making arguments. It's just whichever one wants to frame it as what they're doing as posing.
This is so unfair, and it's ironic when all I was doing...
I'm not talking about you.
All I was doing was lifting you up, laying you up, so that you could clarify your point about the person not owning the opinions that they're stating.
Am I? But let's be clear. I'm not talking about you. I'm saying just people do this.
People,
okay, it could be heavy. So well, in any case,
I will give my personal opinion though, because you made me think about it. I would be totally fucked without the internet. If without the internet,
everyone would be. Almost everyone would be.
I would be in this tiny little town with my only social network, intellectual and otherwise, would be, unless I get on a plane and fly somewhere, which I hate, would be like the handful of people, in my little town. And don't get me wrong, I like the people in my little town. They're fine. But it's not the same. The internet has allowed me to connect with a much broader variety of people, and I'm thankful for it. So there you go.
So I'm actually going to give Sam Harris's manager credit in a minute. So you might think I'm arrayed against him unfairly, but I'm gonna give him kudos. So in any case, I think he's doing that trick. I do think he's doing that, and I think it is based around the popular framing in alternative media. Or actually, it's a popular framing in general around there's a current modern day existential meaning crisis that we haven't experienced before. Young men don't know what to do, blah, 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 blah. But actually, when you look at history, this is a common motif. Right?
It's normal for young men to be like this, unfortunately. But your other point, which is like just own your opinions. That is a disease, right? And it's not restricted to there is this sort of irony.
Oh yeah,
thing,
the irony armor. Yeah,
the irony armor, which I've done too, and I understand why people do it, because it's a defensive thing, because people will jump on you for there's always something to jump on, and you see liberals do it. You see the shit posting on the favored by right wing people, and everyone too, and I understand the reasons for it, but it's not a healthy dynamic where people can just always go, well, I'm just exploring ideas. I'm just asking questions. I'm just joking. Who knows what I think? Nobody stands behind their opinions at all. So I just want to say I'm 100% in agreement with you with this.
That's like the same frustration with Jordan Peterson a lot of time is like I just want people to directly answer what their position is. And like agree or disagree with it is one thing, but just say what you're arguing and what you think. And they're so reticent, so many people who are like kind of afraid to take do that
position. And like, that's what I wanted to say. Like, I wanted to say it's okay to say, look, I can see value in people finding traditional religion. I can see value in the communities, whatever. It's okay to say that you think social media has been a bad influence and people should connect with one person. I don't know if it's probably not, you can argue for it, argue against it. As we just talked about, we can see strong arguments on the other side. But it's okay to have that opinion. It's okay to just stand by it. Don't make out that you're just asking questions and you don't really think that.
I know. That's the issue. See, Matt, we've restored accord to the podcast. We're back in simpatico. It's all right. You can disagree vigorously and, then return. It's okay. It's all right. Now, the next clip. So this is still talking about like Sam's upcoming appearance with Jordan Peterson, and it references, the atheism debacle, the discussion on Jubilee that we talked about last time. So Sam's manager raises this to him.
If there's no Chewy center of superstition and otherworldliness and expectation of redemption after death, there has to be some magic in there. Otherwise, we're just talking about, who's going to bring the egg salad for the picnic, right? I mean, it's like can we figure out some other way to picnic? I mean, it's not just a tailgate. You're tailgating for God here. You're tailgating for eternity, and that's what makes it especially meaningful, right?
Okay, well, back to Jordan.
And Jordan doesn't disavow that. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to talk about with Jordan. It's been a very long time since we've spoken, and I haven't really followed all of his.
Well, but did you see that clip of him going? Well, we're going to talk about that too in a second. Did you see that clip going around with him on the Jubilee podcast episode where
I saw that it exists? I actually didn't watch. I think I saw. I caught part of a clip, but I just decided to not pollute my brain with it in advance of my conversation with him. I could see that there was some kind of consensus forming online that he had not acquitted himself well in those conversations, and whether that.
Do you not want to talk to him about that? I think it'd be very interesting to talk to him about it because I just didn't want to prejudice I can't imagine he wants to talk to me about it, right? And I don't know what I can say to him. I mean, I know how Jordan debates atheists because I've debated him. It would be unsurprising to me that if you stuck 20 atheists in a room with him, it wouldn't go very well. I mean, it's not like anyone on his side has good answers to the questions atheists pose. There are no good answers, right? I mean, the atheists, the religious people are slow to recognize it, but they really are. They're standing on just a mountain of non sequiturs.
Now, Matt, you and I probably agree with Sam Harris's assessment there of how those debates are likely to go and the logic behind it. But I did just want to note that Sam's going to have a conversation with Jordan, right? And this manager's like, well, did you see the recent, clips, like where he's, engaging in rhetorical techniques and, avoiding answering straightforward questions of religion? And Sam's response is he didn't want to pollute his brain with those clips in advance of the conversation. He didn't want to prejudice himself by seeing them. And that strikes me as like an odd response. Why would Sam, seeing Jordan behaving evasively and arguing about these things, like why would that pollute your brain?
I take your point, which is why wouldn't you understand something about the person that you're debating? Why wouldn't you do the research? Why wouldn't you check the details? I also can, look, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying Sam is doing the right thing here. I'm sure the way that you do it is the right thing to do. But I understand the impulse to not want to.
Okay. Let me just respond to your little dig there. So, okay. So first I'll be charitable. Here's charitable, Chris. So I agree, Matt. I agree that it's perfectly fine that he doesn't want to listen to the Jubilee. And he's probably right that he can predict how Jordan's going to be, right? He has experienced them avoiding questions for multiple hours, right? Directly to his face. So he gets it. Now, he might not be aware of just how bad Jordan did in those things, but I'm sure, it wouldn't be enlightening to him to watch those videos. But my issue is more around the notion about finding out this kind of thing being a pollution to the pristine, untouched conversation that you're going to have with Jordan. And that does seem to be a thing that Sam in general approaches, that like he wants to approach people without having done deep dives on their work and letting that bias him. So when he spoke, with Charles Murray and had the debate with Ezra Klein, Ezra Klein was like, well, but have you seen his other output? Have you seen these other interviews? And Sam was like, no. Then none of that is relevant to the points that I'm making. And that was the main point of contention, right? Sam had read the Bell Curve, one book, and in isolation, he decided that was a good book and that, Charles Murray was unfairly vilified. And in the same respect, whenever I asked him, Sam, you talk about like the way that anthropologists or extremist researchers talk about radicalization and the role of doctrine. But have you actually read like relevant research and papers? Because there's lots of model. And he was like, I've spoken to, one anthropologist, Scott Adrian, who said this. But it was very much like, I know what they're getting at, but without doing the requisite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's quite similar to what we talked about earlier, which is that people will express a very strong opinion about Joe Rogan just being a regular guy.
Exactly.
Without troubling themselves to check, with claiming that Elon Musk must be a really smart guy without actually having a look at what he says and what he writes. So, like I said, I understand the impulse there, which is you avoid content that you don't really find very enjoyable and pleasant to deal with.
Could you have an indulgent conversation with Jordan Peterson or Jonathan Peugeot where you talk about, various topics, but you avoid some of the more controversial opinions or conspiratorial stuff? Yes, like you can do that. But if the actual points of agreement, like strong agreement, the strong criticisms of Jordan Peterson are because of his conspiracism, his polemical nature and whatnot, why avoid that? Like, why avoid knowing about that explicitly and present it as polluting? Because one of the things that Sam Harris often has said recently is like, maybe I'm not a good judge of character. Maybe I have been unable to notice that a bunch of people that I associated with were heading down a polemical or conspiratorial path, and I didn't see the warning signs. But I think part of the reason that you'll never see the warning signs is if you consistently avoid consuming people's content, right? So like Sam was very slow to notice Dave Rubin and his trajectory, and that was very obvious. But did Sam actually listen to Dave Rubin's episodes? Probably not. And just to highlight this, Matt, that was the manager talking about like, oh, so you're not going to watch the Jubilee episode? Like you said, we can maybe all have sympathy for Sam not wanting to watch that. But listen to this. This is his manager talking about the editor, Griffin, putting together a little package for him in preparation for the interview.
Griffin put together a list. Griffin put a list together for some of the things he's also said on climate change and Russia, Ukraine might be.
Right. But I mean, it's his podcast. I mean, I don't think I should go on his podcast to perform an intervention. He invited me to have a conversation. Presumably he wants to talk about something. So,
well, when he's done, maybe I have a few questions for you.
I mean, just to think of, it would be a little weird for me to invite someone on my podcast because I thought I wanted to talk to them about something. And then we flip on the mics and they have a list of things they think I've a list of instances where they think I put my foot in my mouth and they're going to go after me for them. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't welcome that, but it would be kind of an odd way to
well, all you have to do is just say, listen, I have a few questions I want to get to first. And why don't we do that after? Great.
Right. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting.
I mean, I really don't feel a need to perform an intervention on him. Obviously,
No,
I'm not
not
going to be
intervention.
shy about pushing back on anything that I disagree about, but it just seems odd for me to say, hey, listen, Jordan, my team has found all of this digital dirt on you, and here's where you have embarrassed yourself. What about X, Y, and Z?
We're not trying to play gotcha. I think you're just looking to get some clarity.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, and the way Sam is framing it there is really quite not accurate. Sam frames it as, like you guys have been trawling through Jordan Peterson's stuff and found some dirt on him, some embarrassing little things that he might have said once or twice, and I'm going to bring that up. When, like, what he's referring to is the bulk of Jordan's output. That's right. And, like, studiously ignoring it. Like studied ignorance, well, it's an option. I think this goes to like Sam Harris's philosophy of life, right? And his like he has this sort of Buddhist kind of no mind type thing, perfect logical clarity and so on, which dovetails very nicely with I think his autodidactic sort of frame where you don't need to inform yourself about all of the chatter and all of the noise out there in the world. You've got access to the pure truth yourself, and you can share it with people if they simply provide you some independent stimulus with which to elicit it from you. And my gut feeling is that this is how Sam sees himself, and it's internally consistent to a degree, but yeah.
It's internally consistent. Personally, I think it's fucking lazy because if your job is that you're a podcaster and pundit, and sure, Sam does other things, he does interviews and whatnot, but like you don't spend an evening researching Jordan Peterson's output. You don't just go to his channel and watch his most recent free videos or whatever. How come I do that when I'm going to go on a random small podcast for like another academic podcast or whatever? I check out what their general approach and Sam, like you said, he just doesn't seem to do that. And here he's almost implying that that's a bad thing.
Yeah, he's making it a virtue, what he does.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like the bad thing would be to go and look at, critical videos about Jordan Peterson or
that would just be trolling for dirt, Chris. That would be very
yeah. And the thing is, like you said, that what Jordan Peterson actually advocates for, what the majority of his content is this kind of strong polemical conspiratorial stuff. And if you're not aware of that, like you're not aware of what Jordan Peterson is arguing for and putting out. And that's why like when, we talk with Sam and he's like, I don't know what Majid Nawaz is doing. I haven't paid much attention to Eric Weinstein. I'm not sure what Douglas Murray says about Hungary. It allows you to say all those things. But like the question is, why not? Like, why not check? So just to be clear, in this case, I thought I could be helpful to Sam. He shouldn't want to watch the Jubilee video, understandable. I did send him by email 3 videos that I would recommend that he might want to watch in advance of his interview with Peterson, just so he knows, what kind of positions that Jordan has and might be prepared, to actually not be blindsided by Jordan's views. So I recommended, the Trump X-Men video where he did the psychological analysis of RFK Jr. and Trump and Elon Musk. That video, the recent video where he was reacting to the Harvard being defunded, where he was reading the article and giving his line-by-line response to it. And then the interview with Destiny, where Destiny does at some stages, say, well, hold on, but you're arguing for this, and, kind of pushes back against the conspiracism. And it descends as to, like a kind of almost immediate Jordan Peterson getting very angry and flustered and whatnot. So, maybe Sam doesn't have time to watch them, and maybe he'll miss the email or whatever. But at least there was an attempt to suggest, I did my part, Matt. I tried to say, maybe it's worth doing this preparation. And it's the same message that we had whenever, Sam did the episode on the Lamb Leak. He had a long conversation with Alina Chan and Matt Ridley and raised all these questions that the experts weren't willing to answer. Nobody has been willing to address these scientific questions. We were able to get 3 leading scientists in that area, the relevant experts that you want to talk to, and they happily talked for 3 hours for the answers to the specific questions that Sam raised. I've never heard him reference those answers, by the way, in like any subsequent media. So,
Yeah, I know.
So, but this is me, to be clear, giving Sam Harris's manager credit. Okay. I'm saying here, I'm totally on his side. Like I'm appreciating his just asking question approach, but I don't think he's made any headway.
Yeah. Agreed.
That's Sam's manager doing good things after me criticizing him for not owning his opinions. But I'll just boomerang back for the last clip, Matt. This is a little discussion around TRT and whether it's helpful or beneficial or not. And it's not related to Jordan Peterson, that bit's finished, but just have a little listen to this.
I've actually forgotten what all the probabilities around bad outcomes from TRT, but they're just like if there were no side effects and no possibility of being very unhappy that you did one of these things, then then there's just I've got zero. It's like buying clothing at that point. Why not wear the shirt you like?
I think we're going to have Peter Attia come on for a couple of minutes on one of these episodes and talk us through TRT and some of that, because I'd like to know.
We have friends who are doing it, and they seem to be happy they're doing it. And and if my testosterone dropped at below a certain range, I'm sure I would boost it too. Weightlifting is one way to boost it, and obviously do that. But I've got zero judgment about any of that. I just think that the results are uncertain enough in most cases, and the side effect profile is unacceptable in many cases, and therefore I have not been tempted. But for those who do it and have good results, I'm nothing but happy for them.
Yeah, I was about to say I'd be on it right now if I wasn't so petrified of needles. When they make a pill that or something
for TRT.
Right. that does that is as effective.
Look up the side effects or potential side effects.
No, I'm saying what we're gonna have. I'm gonna reach out to Peter and say, hey, come on for a couple of minutes. Again, as we talked about this, the format of this show, I like the idea of just having maybe in the future a quick special guest to hop in and we could talk to. I don't know.
Now, Matt, just remember, this isn't about the manager's positions, right? Like he doesn't have any point of view. He's just devil's advocating. Doesn't this little segment kind of contradict that actually he wants to know more about TRT and he's like concerned? Like you see the contradiction here, right? Yeah. It's not just in my head.
I think you've established the point. Okay,
but you got it, right?
Why are people into TRT? Like, I'm so naive about this thing. Do they want bigger muscles, or do they want to be more virile? Like, what does it do? Like except for really serious clinical conditions, what does the average recreational user get from it?
Yeah, I think those are the two main things. Like, kind of as people get older and they become, less virile and less physically capable and TRT can help, people to stay active for longer and these kind of things. But
Active.
like Sam suggests,
Active escape.
but perform better at sports and this kind of stuff as well. And
Look, you just avoid sports. You don't need to take pills or get injections. You just embrace androgeneity. That's what I say.
Well, that's not what they do, Matt. They don't. They're in crisis. The meaning crisis. Men are lonely. Men are concerned. men. Right? This is but you're right. Like the part of the reason that I put this is just like, this is like this whole segment thing is just Sam talking about, general things that are in the discourse and his opinion on it or whatever. But, the things which are in the discourse, particularly when they're being presented by this manager, they do take a particular shape, which is, Jordan Peterson, the meaning crisis, is TRT good for you? It's just very familiar stuff that you would see in like Chris Williamson's podcast or whatever, right? There are things that can be said about the discourse by the kinds of questions that you raise.